All right, welcome everyone to today's All Hands on Deck call. I'm Carrie Jensen with the National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children, and so glad to have all of you with us here today. We have several of our staff on the call with us. You'll be hearing from some of us, and we also have some of our great partners here with us today as we kind of go through our presentation and the information that we're going to share today. Eric, if you could do the next slide, please. So today we are going to talk about the DEC Development Academy that we have and that we're able to offer. We're going to go through the DEC Development Academy 101, the Train the Trainer, and the DEC Development Academy 201 that we are going to be able to start offering later this year. So we're excited to share information about that and hope that you have a lot of questions. Please enter those in the chat throughout, and we hopefully will be able to answer all those either in the chat or through our conversation today.
So we are going to give you some information around the DEC Development Academy first, the 101 portion. This is what we had initially developed. We're going to provide an overview, give you the schedule, talk about some of our partners, Academy attendees and that kind of thing, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. Keep in mind too, we're also going to have an opportunity at the end to ask questions as well. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background, we developed this with Mid-America PTTC. You'll notice that Steve Miller is also on here. He is the director of that program, and he helps with the 4-state region. But we really, when we first started talking about the DEC Academy, we really wanted it to be for everybody. So we really wanted it to be a front load of information, trainings, activities to get people started. Because what we really kept hearing is that they wanted more information up front to develop their local alliance or their regional alliance or their state alliance or the tribal alliance, but also to get their efforts going. And so the DEC Academy really does all of that. It takes a lot of information and a lot of different activities on around a lot of different DEC topics and provides it up front to really get people started talking about what this looks like in their community, what this looks like in their state, and how to do it. So that was kind of the purpose of the DEC Academy 101. So we have changed some of it, added some things, tried different things. And so you will see that what we have up there is kind of what we've landed on. And you'll notice the numbers across the top are 1 through 14. So, but 1 through 7 are going to be the different classes or the different trainings that we go through. So we do an orientation training. We do under number 1 say online training because we do have 4 free module online trainings that we want people to take prior to number 2 through 14. And then we also we provide the core DEC training, the capitalize your capacity training, really to build capacity and get people thinking about who to bring to the table, what to do in our community, how to talk about things. And then number 4, that 4th training is going to be the DEC approach training, really taking that awareness to action within the communities. And then we do have number 5 and number 6, which I know people are super excited about, introduction to the harms of marijuana and its impacts on children, and then also the intersection of DEC and human trafficking, kind of an overview of those. So we do both of these because they seem to be topics that people are most confused about, most wanting information about. And really we want people just to upfront get started on thinking about how to attack these 2 issues because they're very big in communities across the nation. So that was kind of the understanding around that. And then we do a DEC development in regards to promising practices for number 7. And then the coaching sessions, which I think are amazing, are 1-hour sessions, individual sessions that really focus on what folks are wanting. It could be community assessment. It could be bringing people to the table. It could be awareness. It could be implementing something. So it can really be a variety of different things. Those are really focused and targeted technical assistance. We call them coaching because they're pretty in-depth or can be. So just to kind of give you an idea, we've done this so far in Kansas, Massachusetts, Tennessee, and Michigan. And we have folks in a region in Alaska, Missouri, Iowa, Tennessee again, Nebraska, and then a couple tribes as well. So we really target anybody who is wanting to get things started and front load information. So whether you're a state, a local community, a region, a tribe, it doesn't matter. You just have to get in contact with us and we'll schedule things. So we are going to have 3 folks talk about what it was like going through one of the DEC Academies. Spencer Earhart from Tennessee, Pam Ford and Joy Schwartz from Kansas, and then James Henning from Colorado. So I'm going to hand it over to Spencer first to talk about Tennessee.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Spencer Earhart, and I'm the Drug Endangered Children Coordinator with the Drug Free Dixon Coalition in Dixon County, Tennessee. So I'm about an hour west of Nashville. And I attended the DEC Academy, and it was extremely beneficial for me. But before I tell you why it was so beneficial, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal history and what brought me to the DEC mission. Early, I was probably in 8th grade, and it was supposed to be a very exciting time for me. We were going to be welcoming a new family member. It was going to be a first girl cousin that I was going to have on my mother's side. And the day came for her to be born. And all of a sudden, through my 8th grade mind, I realized that some things were a little bit different. Long story short, her mother ended up having a stroke, and they ended up testing my cousin at birth, and she tested positive for meth. And so I saw firsthand the effects of substances on children, but also the whole process of interaction with child welfare. And fortunately for my cousin, we had grandparents that were able to step up and foster her and her older brother until her parents were able to be reunited with them. But I learned a lot in that time in my life. And so a couple years go by, and I go on to college and graduate with a degree in criminal justice in 2016. And I work a couple different jobs after I graduate. But one day my phone rang from a colleague that I knew to let me know that Dixon County, so where I'm from, was receiving a grant from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation for a Drug Endangered Children Response Team Coordinator. And they wanted to know if I'd be interested in that position. So I let them know I would think about it for a little while. And after I thought about it, it seemed to fit exactly what I wanted to do. I'd be using my criminal justice degree, but also helping children in the community at the same time. So I'd applied and was fortunate enough to be hired on in the position. And I've been in this position for a little over 2 years. What's unique about this position here in Tennessee is that there are 7 of us across the state of Tennessee, these drug endangered children coordinators, and we're all embedded in substance abuse prevention coalitions. So our DEC alliances are in substance abuse prevention coalitions. And they did that because of all the community partners and stakeholders that are already at the table with these substance abuse prevention coalitions. And so it's kind of a warm handoff to get these DEC alliances started because we have so many different community sectors at the table. Now, whenever I first started in this position, it was a big transition for me. Obviously, I had some firsthand experience of drug endangered children and its effects, but I still didn't know about adverse childhood experiences or prenatal substance exposure. So, a big thanks to National DEC because their website and resources really helped bring me up to speed and allow me to educate myself to become more effective with my position. So my role is pretty comprehensive. So I have a wide scope of things that we try to accomplish. Of course, there are some primary things that we try to accomplish. Among those are, community-based partnerships that encourage multidisciplines and collaboration to rescue, shelter, and defend and support children living in drug endangered environments. But we also want to break the intergenerational cycle of abuse and neglect. If you can intervene for that one child and change the trajectory of their life, you're also changing subsequent generations as well. And so that's something that we try to do, but we also try to create a community that responds to drug endangered children. So going beyond just the individuals who come in contact with these children, your child welfare, your educators, your law enforcement, but creating a community. So doing a lot of speaking in specific organizations, trying to educate people how to identify children living in drug endangered environments or in neglect and abuse, and educating them on mandatory reporting laws and what numbers to contact. So with all that being said, I attended the DEC Academy this past spring, and it was extremely beneficial. And here's a couple reasons why it was so beneficial. First and foremost, you receive so much applicable knowledge that directly benefits your community. And it's also actionable. So what I mean by this is that the information you receive is relevant and also as practical value. An example of this is early on, Eric Nations challenged us to know the importance of knowing the state statute for neglect, that threshold that has to be met before neglect, that child welfare can act upon neglect. And that seems like something that would be so simple, but I found that that is something that causes a lot of frustration. As a lot of times, especially whether it be law enforcement or just the population in general, we'll see a situation that personally it meets their criteria for neglect, but it doesn't meet the state statute criterion for neglect, and therefore kind of causes a little bit of frustration. And so actually an example of this came up in our community not long after the academy, where law enforcement was becoming very frustrated because they felt like their reports to child welfare was not being acted upon. And so upon hearing a lot of their frustration, I said, we need to try to have a meeting between child welfare and law enforcement and see what we can do here. So we contacted a regional manager for the Department of Children's Services and had a meeting between her and several of her social workers and law enforcement, and came together and talked about their frustrations. And they were, then the child welfare had the opportunity to educate them on the criterion that have to be met, but also how to better fill out these reports, because it turns out they weren't necessarily, not that they weren't doing them right, but there's a much better way of filling out the reports that they honestly didn't know about. But one neat thing that came out of that meeting that I hadn't anticipated beforehand was they left with the feeling of, oh, we're not that as different as we thought we were. We're all here for the benefit of the child. And so that was really cool to see that. And that was some of the benefits of the DEC Academy being applicable and actionable. And another huge thing that I learned that kind of goes back with that example is that we all must be speaking the same language. A lot of the frustrations that we deal with is just not realizing each other's goals. A lot of times people, especially law enforcement, don't realize that reunification is the goal in many circumstances whenever a child's been removed. And so understanding that and working together, it allows us to work together a little bit more and kind of release some of that frustration. Another huge benefit of the Academy for me was that it fostered so many beneficial conversations between my colleagues and I. For us, our Academy was virtual, and I'll be honest, at first I was like, here we go with another virtual thing. But there was so much good information that it never occurred to me that it was online. Eric, Stacy, and Carrie do such a great job of keeping it flowing that I never just felt like I was just staring at a computer screen. I felt involved and that I was learning something. And there was also breakout rooms. And so these breakout rooms fostered a lot of beneficial conversations. There was people on the call because it was virtual that otherwise wouldn't have probably been able to be there in person. So there was, for example, James Henning in Colorado, Steve Miller was there, and they were in my breakout rooms on a couple occasions. And I was able to learn from their experience that had we not been virtual, I wouldn't have been able to learn from them and hear their perspectives and their wisdom. But also another benefit of having so many different people on the call. I mean, we were able to bring our partners on board. So, our partners in law enforcement, educators, child welfare. And what that did was provide so many different perspectives. And there were a few real life examples that we walked through with the DEC Academy that highlighted the different perspectives, but was so beneficial. And there was an example where they showed us a body cam footage of a police officer walking through a home that most people would think that a child has no business living in. And that was the reaction for most of us, like, this home is not suitable for children. These children need to be removed. But what was so interesting was there was a gentleman in our cohort who had worked as an investigator for child welfare. And he said, oh, wait a minute. Before we get too carried away, there's actually some things here, and here that we could work with. And that started a whole conversation between this gentleman and some of the police officers on the call that I think everybody left with a better understanding, but also kind of highlighted the work that we have to do, because people don't know that a lot of times whenever we're trying to collaborate, it's based off competition instead of cooperation. And so that within that academy, that kind of showed us the work that we have to do, but that also cooperation is possible as well. Also, another huge benefit of the DEC Academy, obviously, is that you were taught the DEC approach. And that's having a common vision, ongoing collaboration with partners and disciplines, and ongoing change. And for the sake of time, I'll tell you what I learned about one of those. And of course, that's collaboration, which collaboration is a huge part of what I do here. But collaboration has to be intentional. It's something that doesn't just happen. You have to take a step and make that happen. Collaboration is so important because local people solve local problems, and drug endangered children in your community is a local problem. And of course, it's going to change from community to community, the different dynamics and the different substances. So it's important to involve local people. That's one thing that I learned from the DEC Academy. It must be a win-win situation. Nobody wants to work with someone who's a bully or takes advantage of others. You have to lift up your other organizations. I make you better and you make me better. That's just such a huge part of collaboration. But it also takes time. You have to be patient. It takes time to build trust, especially if there's been a history of distrust between organizations or agencies. And so you have to be patient, but just remain steady and just continue to work towards that, because it's not a destination, it's an ongoing journey. And you have to continue working on that.
So I love the journey part, Spencer, because I have to tell you, I think people think oftentimes like, oh, we did this and now what? And they don't want to continue to put in the work, but you're right. It is a journey and you have to be intentional about each part of it. But you have talked about a ton of the benefits, and I appreciate that, because it's great for us to talk about it, but to hear actual people who are boots on the ground doing it every day is so important. So I appreciate all of the stuff that you brought today and talked about, because I think that's going to be great information moving forward to folks. Absolutely. And I appreciate what you're doing in Tennessee, because you guys are rocking it out.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I love it. So we are going to move on to Kansas. Pam and Joy, I will turn it over to you all.
Okay, I'm Joy Schwartz. I'm a community support specialist for DECA. I provide TA assistance to coalitions and task forces in Southwest Kansas, and I have 20 of those. And to tell you a little bit about how we got started, Spencer pretty well told you a lot of what, so I won't go into all those things, but about 2 years ago, our supervisor asked all the community support specialists in Kansas, which there are 5 of us, if we could recruit one of our organizations to start a Drug Endangered Children Alliance in our community. And since I live in Pratt, Kansas, which is about 70 miles south or west of Wichita, and we have about 7,500 people in our county, it's small. But since I lived here, I thought, well, I'd have more time to put into the efforts here. So I went to the county attorney here in Pratt and asked her if it was something she thought our community could use. And she was all excited about it. She said, yes, we have a big drug problem here. I would love to get involved in the academy. So then she suggested that we ask the school counselor, a social worker at one of our schools here in town. So she contacted her, and then the counselor knew Pam from the Hope Center. And so she said, hey, Pam would be good too. So the 4 of us went through the academy. As everybody knows, just as we were getting ready to start it in person, COVID hit. So we did it gradually over the next few months with Stacy and Eric and Dave Clausen. And so it took us a little bit longer to get started than we wanted, but it turned out that it gave us some more time to plan and decide who needs to be at the table. And when I work with coalitions, we talk about the 12 sectors. So I thought that'll be great for an alliance too. So we talked to law enforcement and DCF and ministerial, the ministers in town, our mental health facility, the hospital, teachers. We have 2 schools here in town. So we got the counselor from the other school to come to it. And we had everybody do a MOU and tell us, what they can do, how their protocol works. If they do get a child that's in danger, how do they enforce whatever they're going to do? Are they going to put them in foster care? what their responsibilities are. I know a lot of times people are good to say, well, they should have removed that child and they left that child there, not understanding that DCF can't just remove a child until there's some court action. So it made, so then law enforcement can take them out. But it was kind of got rid of that blame game of like, why aren't you doing this when you have a child that's endangered? So now we understand what protocols are amongst those different agencies. We've identified some issues that we've had in town. So we've talked a little bit about those and done some different informational meetings to let people know. And I'll let Pam talk a little bit about that and some other things that we've done. But if you're trying to build a new Drug Endangered Children Academy in your town or alliance, be sure you're getting all the right people at the table. That's important to make it successful. And hopefully I can get some more going in Western Kansas. So I'm going to turn it over to Pam now.
I'm Pam Ford. My background is in early childhood special education. So I was a early Head Start teacher for 13 years. And then I worked in Tiny K for the last 5 years before coming to social work. I'm a nonprofit director for a couple of nonprofits in our town. And so my heart still lies with children and families. I did a lot of home visits over the years. My last 5 years of my job was purely home visiting with the littles. And often I had children that were addicted, born addicted, or parents were in recovery. So I've worked closely in that. I know what that looks like. I know some of the home conditions. I'm used to that. So, you know, I also, like Spencer, have had a history of addiction in my family. I have a nephew that has 2 children that are drug endangered children. And I have a niece who is currently in addiction, and her daughter's being raised by my brother and his wife. So I've seen that. I've seen how it plays from every angle in the professional world and the personal world. So I know how important it is to help these kiddos in that situation and give their families the resources that they need. Yeah, when Terry and Joy, you know, we're in a small town, so we all know each other. But when they approached me about this, I was just so excited. And of course, my boards on both of my full-time jobs, they were very supportive and wanted me to go through this as well and do something that was important to me. So I'm the one that does the grant writing. I also do the Facebook page and that type of thing for our alliance. So we wrote a grant. We decided that we'd do a grant for a kids fair. So we did that at the end of April. That was a huge success. We could not be happier with how that turned out. It's been really great working with local law enforcement and learning from them, having them bring to our attention some things that we didn't even know were needed in our county. So we've been working on several things, you know, besides just the drug endangered aspect. We have a lot of kiddos that we don't have any foster cares in our area. So when children are removed for police protective custody, they have to go really far away. They have to go across the state to be placed for that 48 hours. And so we found out about that, and that's something we're also working on. So having just so many people at the table to let us know what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis has helped us all to know what our community needs are and to help address those needs. So we've had some informational meetings in our county about child endangerment and about child care and about, you know, just placement, mental health. We've really pulled a lot of people to the table there, and we're seeing more and more community engagement and involvement in our alliance. We have our local skating rink owners there at our meetings now. We have hairstylists coming to our meetings. People are really learning and taking notice and wanting to make things better for people in our community. So that's really nice to see. The DEC Academy, at first we were kind of all disappointed because we were involved right at the beginning of COVID. So when we started, we thought we would have some in-person meetings that ended up all being online. But as Spencer said, you kind of didn't even really feel that way because we really did get to engage with a lot of people and learn from a lot of people. That was very helpful. You know, it's great. We're continuing to work. We're now we're working on, the district attorney is one of our 4 on our steering committee. So she is doing the 501c3 paperwork for us to get our own 501c3 status, so that, you know, we go and speak to different organizations in our community and they all want to hand us money. And we know we can do a lot more with money. So we're working on that so that we can take on more things in our community. So it's just been great to see so much involvement, so much support, and people really wanting to just come together to make this life better in our community for children and families.
And I want to brag just a little bit on the kids fair. We were hoping for between 100 and 150 people to show up. We had it in the park. A bunch of different agencies heard about it, said, hey, how about if we join, have a booth there? So we had all kinds of different agencies in town involved. And we had between 700 and 800 people show up. So that was, we thought it was going to be something little and it turned into something big. And now people are already talking about, hey, next year, let's do this too. So that's pretty exciting. So if you're talking to the right people, you're going to get that message out there and you're going to really get excitement in your community.
Perfect. It sounds like that's exactly what you guys did. You took something little and expanded on and made it huge all the way around. So great work. Great work. I did put something in the chat too about the personal stories. You guys are reminding me that the personal stories from everybody are so important to these efforts as well. So keep sharing that. It's super impactful. So thank you, Joy and Pam. We are going to now move on to James Henning from Colorado. If you want to take it over, James, that would be awesome.
Thanks. Thanks, Stacy. I don't know how to, I just heard my favorite quote from Pam. It's, we can do a lot more with money. So I think you pretty much summed it all up for all of us. Again, I'm James Henning. I retired from the Denver Police Department 2 years ago. As a lieutenant back in 2012, I went to narcotics, and that's where I was introduced to the concepts of DEC. I became an instructor for DEC, kind of the old model instructor back then. And then about the same time, I became the point person for marijuana legalization in the city and county of Denver. And career-wise, it's pretty rare that you get to be the point person for the point police department, for the point state, for a new law of the first thing literally in the world. And that's the legalization of recreational marijuana. And when we were setting up for this meeting, a few minutes before the meeting started, Steve said, well, everything is going great, right? The money's flowing. There's no mental health issues. There's no issues at all. And he was being slightly facetious, but he was correct. The sad thing is, when we went through this and marijuana was legalized, there was one small group of people that they really didn't consider, and that was the kids. So I have a background in marijuana legalization as well as drug endangered children. And believe it or not, there's so many parallels between the two, not only in all the alliances and coordination you have to build to address the issues, but also the fact that people think, well, it's legal now, so what's the problem? Now that it's legal, there's no harms that can come to kids from it. And the truth is, it's actually worse now, because now we have people doing things in their homes that have raised harms for children, both directly and indirectly. So I'll be teaching one of the blocks in the 101 class, and really starting to educate people on marijuana and the impacts of marijuana and those risks and how they translate to the kids. So 101 will really be dedicated to those immediate risks for the kids. What's it like to live in a house with a marijuana grow in the house? It's not simply a grow light and mom watering a plant every day. There's a lot of hazards that go along with that folks really don't understand. The other part, another part of that first session in 101 is going to be talking about the types of marijuana. Everyone thought they just legalized Cheech and Chong smoking a doobie or a bong and in their basement, no problem. and the reality and how products, high THC products such as vapes, concentrates, and edibles have taken over the market, and these are being produced at home, and a lot of times it's incredibly hazardous the way these places are being these concentrates are being created at home. So I'll talk to you about the types of marijuana, the potency of these high concentrate products, as well as the dangers and how they are produced, because kids are living in these homes with these production methods, with these grow houses and all of that. And then when you layer on the criminal element of the black market and how valuable marijuana still is in the black market, kids have that added danger of the criminal element put together with all of that. So, you know, why marijuana? One is because it's a really good example of dangers to kids. And just because it's legal doesn't mean the dangers and the risks went away. But also it's a great illustration of all narcotics, all drugs, substance use disorders, and the dangers to those kids living in families dealing with substance use disorders. And then in 201, just to touch on it real quickly, we're going to look more at the long-term risks and impacts of marijuana and high potency THC products, looking at the adverse childhood ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, as well as the trauma that goes along with it. We're going to take a good hard look at the impact on the adolescent brain and how marijuana is really impacting the mental development of our adolescents, of our teens. And then that just continues that DEC cycle, because these kids, it's the accelerant to the DEC cycle. And within a few years of becoming teens and having impacts from marijuana, these kids go out and start families of their own. And it really accelerates that cycle. So to understand it, you need to understand all of that. And then finally, just to wrap up, the skill sets I learned with DEC and working within the DEC Alliance in Denver and in Colorado are many of the same skill sets I had to learn with marijuana and the regulation of marijuana and cooperating with all of our allied partners. So there's so many parallels. Marijuana makes a really good fit for discussing DEC. So that's my pitch.
Perfect. So I forgot to mention that James Henning is actually the person who is conducting or providing the marijuana training throughout the academy. So that's why he's talking about some of the marijuana stuff here now, because he wants to at least do a little teaser, because we do think it's an important issue, and it's probably one of the issues that's the most misunderstood across the board. So that's the reason why we invited him to do those trainings. So you're hearing it from somebody who's boots on the ground. James, I am going to ask you one question. I know we said we weren't going to do this until the end, but can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts were between old school DEC and new school DEC? Because I know that you went through the academy to gain knowledge and understanding of where things were now, but you also started many years ago, not to date you, but many years ago in DEC efforts when it was kind of old school DEC.
You know what, it was very much law enforcement centered back then, was my impression. And what we as police officers could do when we walk in the door and we encounter these kids. And to go back to what a lot of what Spencer discussed, is there were a lot of misunderstandings about what Department of Human Services could actually do, when they would actually pull this kid out of the home, and then why the heck would you give them back within 72 hours? And there was a lot of misunderstandings there. What I really like about the current one, and I would throw this back to Spencer and Joy and Pam, is the idea that everybody's learning together, and by sitting in the same room or sitting in the same chat room, you start to learn of each other's issues. Somebody talked about, I think it was Pam talked about learning that in order to place a kid, you had to drive them halfway across the state. Well, my gosh, talk about an adverse childhood event is throwing a kid in a police car and drive. Kansas is a big state, right? The old I-70 joke, you can fall asleep on I-70 and wake up 8 hours later and you're still in Kansas and you're still on I-70, right? Imagine it being a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old kid where all of a sudden you're in a police car for 6 hours. How do you even ask to go to the bathroom? I mean, imagine what you're doing to the kid by doing that. And the nice thing is now everybody's talking about, oh, time out. We've got to figure out something better. And you're working towards that goal. And just to get way up on the soapbox, which is about right here, the cool thing is after a while, and I think I heard this from Spencer, and please jump in, but this becomes about a lot more than just DEC. Once these alliances are built, you're talking to each other about foster homes. You're talking to each other about placement of kids, and drugs might not even be involved, but you're still helping the kids. And the cool thing is DEC is that vehicle to build those alliances.
Absolutely. So there is a huge difference, and I love how you talk about it, James, between old school DEC and kind of where we are now and where we've been for the last many years. It was very law enforcement, lots of removals, lots of prosecuting caregivers and parents, and it was just a couple disciplines. And now we are robust. We want all the disciplines involved. We want different areas of expertise and perspective. And that's part of the DEC Academy. And what we talk about is building that capacity. And so one of our partners through ACT Missouri does that, building the capacity for the DEC Academy. And that's a really important session because it really talks about how to do this different. We don't want it to be just a couple disciplines. We want it to be everybody, because we know at the end of the day, it's going to take all of us coming together, making changes, doing true collaboration to change the trajectory of these children's lives. And that's where we have to be. So I think it's important to understand that this isn't just a couple disciplines. This is a lot of people, and that's okay. And that's what makes it somewhat difficult, but the more robust, the better it is, and the more efficient and effective it can be as well. So Joy and Pam and Spencer, do you have anything that you want to add, piggyback off of, expand on real quick before we get started on talking about the next portion of the DEC Academy?
We don't. We're just excited to hear about this new portion of the Academy. So.
Yeah, because when you guys went through it, you guys were our first actual DEC Academy. You didn't get the benefit of the marijuana. So we will have to figure out how we get that to you so you guys can enjoy that benefit as well.
Thanks. We were just talking about, oh man, it would be nice to go through that. So yeah, that'd be
absolutely awesome. Yeah, we'll figure something out. What about you, Spencer? Anything you want to add to any part of it?
Sure. I was just going to echo kind of what James had said. You know, one thing that you learn through the DEC Academy is it's never too late to change the status quo. Just because things had been done a certain way in the past doesn't mean that we change things going forward.
Absolutely. And I think that's what people really, they can miss at times. It's okay to do it different. It's okay to look at it different. It's okay to try something different. Some things will work, some things will fail, and you just have to learn from the mistakes and move on. And I think that status quo is something that people get stuck in. It can be one of the big challenges of any kind of social change, including in drug endangered children efforts. So I appreciate that. Perfect. So we are going to move on to talk about the Train the Trainer.
So Stacy, before we move on, if I can kind of just, it was really kind of fun to listen to Joy and Pam and Spencer and James. I actually kind of remember when James went through the Train the Trainer, and I don't know that you were fully bought in back then when you first went through it back in 2012. But to see where James has come today and putting the things together has been really kind of fun to watch and unique, and he's brought a good perspective. And with Joy and Pam, just your perspective from a rural counties, you know, and how you've made it work. And Pam bringing in this personal story. We've all got them. They're a part of every one of our lives. There isn't one of us that is missing out on that. And you know, Spencer, I got to tell you, you're a breath of fresh air because you're the next generation. You're going to carry the torch. And I will tell you, you said you went to school for criminal justice, as I did as well. And I actually like the path that you're heading down. That prevention world path. You're going to make an impact in communities in a way that you will never understand, I think. And you've been a breath of fresh air to be able to hand a torch off to, and the stuff that you're doing. And I think the experience that all of you are bringing to this, whether newer, the new mentality, the rural mentality, the metro mentality, the old school mentality, we're bringing it all together to make it work, not only for ourselves, but our communities. And I really feel like these academies have really strengthened the DEC mission. Where from a national DEC perspective, I felt like we were just throwing stuff out there once in a while, right? Throwing it out there, hoping that something would stick. It's going to stick. With the DEC Academy and how it's kind of been blended together here with all the topics and all the discussion and the way that it's being ran, it's sticking. And it's that sustainability piece that Carrie and Stacy has driven it home for the last 12 years. I feel like it's sticking, and it's just cool, and I appreciate it. I hope you guys can stay on here, because at the end, I'm guessing some of our attendees are going to have a lot of questions for you guys. Keep in mind, these are the professionals that when you seek technical assistance from us, that we're going to reach out to. It's going to be the Joys and the Pams and the James Hennings and the Spencers that are doing the work on the ground, that are going to help us help you guys. So again, thank you so much for your perspectives. And like I said, Spencer, you are a breath of fresh air. I feel like we're handing the torch in the right direction, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. That's awfully kind of you to say.
And I love that Tennessee accent. Yes, he gets Stacy to smile every time he talks. All right. Well, we wanted to discuss a little bit about the DEC Train the Trainer, and this is for the Core DEC and the DEC Approach Train the Trainer to certify you and your community members to present the Core DEC and the DEC Approach training in your communities. Now, it does not certify you to train people to then become a trainer to train people. It allows your people to do the training, if that makes sense, in your communities. And back again, kind of before the DEC Academy and before the virtual world kind of set in, we were doing a lot of Core DEC awareness, train the trainers, to anybody that wanted to be a part of. And what we really found out is people weren't understanding the mission. They liked the concept, but they weren't understanding that mission and that sustainability piece of where we wanted it to end. So now, in order to be qualified to become a Train the Trainer, you definitely have to be Core DEC and DEC Approach trained. You have to have had that training by us or somebody, and we're actually we're moving towards our Train the Trainers are going to have to be DEC Academy 101, the Development Academy certified, to be able to qualify to be a Train the Trainer. And that schedule, we've been doing it now virtually. We've been doing it in person. We still like to do it in person if possible, but we are doing it virtually as well. When we do it in person, it takes about 3 days. It's a 24-hour certification. When we do it virtually, it's still 24 hours. We just have learned our lessons, and we are doing it in 6 4-hour blocks, if that makes sense. We tried to do it in 3 8-hour blocks, and I think not only were the attendees miserable, but us as the trainers were beyond miserable. So if you do it virtually, we're doing 6-hour blocks, or 4-hour blocks for 6 sessions. If we do it in person, we're doing 3 days consecutive while we're there. And like I said, the prerequisite that we're working towards is definitely that you have to be DEC Development Academy 101 certified or a completer of that, and we maintain those records. All right. Well, I was going to have James talk a little bit more about the marijuana and children stuff here, but I think you covered most of that earlier, didn't you, James?
I hit the wrong slide. Can I make one quick comment?
No, but thanks
Okay,
for
well
asking.
then never mind.
No, go ahead, sir.
You know, you talk about buy-in and going from old DEC to new DEC and all of that. The typical cop attitude is throw the bad guy in jail and solve the problem. And after being in narcotics and seeing it all, and the only way I can put it is the tragedy of addiction, the tragedy of substance use disorder. And you start to figure out that, quite frankly, these folks, they don't want to be dependent on substances. They don't want to abuse their kids. They don't want to neglect their kids. It's a bigger force and all of that. And once you kind of figure that out and get a little empathy onto your cop badge, that's what kind of moves you forward, I think, in this. So that's that a little bit of personal mission here is when I encounter the cops to get through that cop skull, a little bit of understanding of that. So I felt like I had to follow up on that comment.
No, I love that. And one thing, James, that you always crack me up from the Academy, because you sat in on a few of the academies as we've been doing this before you actually started presenting the marijuana and drug endangered children stuff, is I think you got a sticky note sitting beside you that starts with the letter R. Do you not?
Yes, that was Stacy yelling at me, risks, risks, risks.
I wouldn't call it yelling.
Oh, well, okay. She doesn't yell at you. She discusses loudly. Oh, and alliances. See, it says alliances. Not
So I love that, because after 30 years in law enforcement, and you've been out for a while now, a couple of years, you're now you're understanding the importance of risk from that child welfare perspective. And that was really kind of cool to watch that happen and you to see that. And you've really implemented that into the 101 portion of the marijuana stuff, but also the 201.
Well, and that was the nice thing about the 101. Just one more plug is learning about adverse childhood events, ACEs, and how that impacts people later in life. And it starts to explain so much, and that's really the core of the entire DEC approach.
Perfect. So we want to tease you a little bit with, it's not out yet, DEC Development Academy 201. It is getting ready to come out, hopefully the fall of this year. We're working with some contractors and stuff like that to make sure we can bring the best material to you guys. But at this time, this is kind of the lineup that we're looking at for DEC Academy 201. It's going to be the same sessions as far as length. There's going to be 14 total. There'll be that orientation of 201 and that overview of 101, just to make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to move into that drug identification, kind of from that 30,000 foot view. We get a lot of requests about drug identification, about all the drugs in that new trend. So we will definitely be marrying up with a professional that can keep us up with current trends on that and relevant information. And then we're going to start diving into that understanding what we've been discussing a little bit in that 101, and that's understanding abuse, child abuse, and neglect. What is it and what are the parameters around it? It's hard to do so for every state because every state is slightly different, but we can definitely give an overview, and we plan on bringing in local experts, whoever does the academy, to help us expand and expound on how it affects them via the state or the local communities. And then as James has brought up, and we have been very fortunate with Stacy going through some courses and stuff like that, we're going to start talking about trauma and its impact. How trauma is impacting these children, these families, and ultimately the communities, and with that child perspective. And then trauma for professionals, you know, that vicarious trauma that we all see, that we all experience. I am very open about the trauma that I didn't think that I had in my law enforcement career over 20 years. But I will tell you, when you hang it up and you put the belt away, it all starts wreaking its head and causing havoc within your life. So we really want to address the professionals, so we're taking care of ourselves. And as Stacy has told me 1,000 times, you can't fill somebody's glass if your glass is half full, right? You got to have a full glass yourself. So, and then we're going to talk more around ACEs, around the ACEs stuff and the adverse childhood experience. But also, Stacy, if you can help me, the positive experiences. I don't know what that's called for sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, we'll talk about those positive experiences and how they also impact the children and the families in the future as well, and the resiliency and building some of those as well. So it'll kind of cover all of it pretty in depth.
Perfect, thank you. And then obviously we're bringing James back to kind of blend it all in, the traumas, the ACEs around marijuana and what he was discussing earlier. And we're bringing the marijuana stuff up because, as James says, legal or illegal, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Just like alcohol impacts parenting and caregiver. With the legalization of marijuana, we have to have the conversation. And we're having the conversation from a very professional, non-opinionated standpoint with facts and fact-based and personal experience. And then we'll wrap it up with coaching sessions. And our goal with the coaching sessions is that we bring in professionals if it's required, like the Spencers and the Joys and the Pams, to help other communities get to where they are at and help them move forward. So that's a little bit about DEC Academy 201. We're excited. Hopefully I can keep my pace and we can get this launched here in the next few months. But that's kind of the plan on that. And with that, Carrie and Stacy, I'll turn it back over to you guys to wrap this up.
Yes, please enter any questions that you might have into the chat. But we did have one, Stacy, that someone was asking, how are people able to pay for the DEC Academies and train the trainer?
Perfect. Well, as you know, DEC efforts don't really have to be started with funding, although funding is always beneficial. But we know that when it comes to training and technical assistance and coaching, obviously we can't do everything for free. So there is a cost, but we are seeing people get really creative in regards to the funding. So we can help with some of that in getting people to think outside the box and apply for different funding. We always recommend checking with foundations within your community, your tribe, or your state, as well as any private opportunities or businesses that would provide any funding. But there are other funding like CJA funding and CAPTA funding that's more at the state level. Every state has VOCA money as well, victims of crime money, through OVC, the Office of Victims of Crime. I know I'm throwing out lots of different acronyms, and I'm actually going to put them in the chat box as well, so you have that. And then there are federal grants. I know this federal grant cycle is done for this part of the year, but check back for different funding opportunities at the federal level, starting late December, early January. And those, and we've seen funding for the DEC Academy through OVC, OJJDP, COSAP, COPS office, BJA, and I will put all of those in the chat box, I promise, because I know there's a lot of acronyms. So there's money out there and can help fund a lot of this. We always say that if you are applying for a grant, throw training and technical assistance money in for drug endangered children efforts, because why not? Addiction and substance use impacts everybody. So it's pretty easy to make the connections with domestic violence and crime victims and those kinds of things. Does that answer that question, Carrie? Does that help?
Yep, I think that does. And if you can throw those acronyms in the chat, I think that'll help even more.
Yes,
Eric,
yes.
Eric, I'll ask you a question while Stacy's doing those acronyms. tell us how coaching is different than the rest of the DEC Academy.
So the coaching sessions are more designed. So when we do the DEC Academy, we're either doing the DEC Academy like by a state and having numerous counties, like 5 or 6 counties come in and try to get those going. Or if we do it in a local area, we're having that local jurisdiction. And with that, there's a lot of questions that don't get asked and brought up during the training for whatever reason. Is anybody is able to request a coaching session. So Spencer could email us and say, hey, I need a coaching session, right? I'm really struggling on getting this part of our community up and running. And we would slot out an hour. And I'll be honest, it's normally 2 hours that we give them. And we'll discuss that. We'll sit down. If Spencer wants us to join a meeting virtually, we'll join a meeting virtually with a group of people. It's just really specific to what that community or that individual is wanting to help grow their DEC efforts.
Perfect, thank you. I know one of the coaching sessions I helped with, they just needed to process everything they had learned. There was 3 of them that joined the coaching session, processed everything they learned in the academy, and then went, oh, okay, I think we're good now. They just needed to talk it out loud. And so we're happy to kind of be that sounding board and help make sure that everyone's on the right page as they move forward too.
So Carrie, the one real goal is that we didn't want to just dump more training and leave. That's why we really build in those coaching sessions is if there is questions that you're not comfortable asking in front of an audience or whatever, that it allows them opportunities to continue the conversation and get that private help, and it's built in.
Eric, can I throw in here that that part of the Mid-America's Community of Practice series that we do with DEC Connect, we're going to continue this kind of conversation, and it's an opportunity to interact kind of more one-on-one with Stacy and Eric. And I'll drop that a link to register for that on August the 24th in the chat if people are interested in joining us for that.
So explain that again real brief, Steve. I know we're at time, but if you can explain that a little bit more.
So the DEC Connect is, we do what's called a community of practice through the Mid-America PTTC, and it's really just an opportunity to kind of flesh out a specific topic. So we might all get together on the 24th and decide what we really like to know more about is DEC 201, the DEC Academy. So, or it might be something a little bit different, like how do you build capacity in your community? And it's an opportunity to really have kind of some of tutoring, if you will, or mentoring in that capacity from both Eric and Stacy and myself, and just kind of have an opportunity to answer questions that you might have about today's discussion or other things in general about drug endangered children.
Thanks, Steve. All right, Eric, if you just pop that last slide up there. Just a list of the National DEC resources, things that we offer and are available. All are available on our website at nationaldec.org. And our contact information is also there, so you can jump on there and learn more and get connected with us to ask any follow-up questions that you might not have been able to get answered today. But thank you everyone for joining us today for the All Hands on Deck call. We'll hang around for a few more minutes if anyone has any additional questions. But thanks so much. Have a great day.